Hello, could you please give me your name and explain which Woodford investment you went into? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alan Pyatt. I invested £46,000 in the Woodford Equity Fund through my IFA during the last 11 months that the fund was active.
Thanks, Alan. And why have you agreed to have this conversation with me, knowing that it's going to be recorded and we'll be putting it out there on social media and so on?
I think it's very important the truth gets out there and that those affected get their say and that others understand better this massive scandal.
Who's your MP, and would you be happy for us to send him or her a link to this recording?
Yes, my MP is Jeremy Wright, and yes, by all means, I'm happy for him to get a copy of it.
Thank you. I think you mentioned this. Did you use an investment platform?
Yes, I used an investment platform. It was Hargreaves Lansdown.
And
The reason we chose the Woodford Fund, it was part of a SIP portfolio that was advised by my IFA, although it was only one fund of 20 within my portfolio.
thank you, Alan. And when you invested, what, if anything, was your understanding of your statutory protections through the Financial Ombudsman Service and the Financial Services Compensation Scheme?
5 years ago, when I basically transferred my pension schemes into the financial markets, I was aware of the Financial Services Compensation Scheme and its £85,000 limit to protect retail investors such as me, and why all my investments were below this limit. Um, I've only been aware of the Financial Ombudsman Service in the last year or so, and I've only just learned about 2 or 3 weeks ago what the difference is between the two, as originally I just thought they were one organisation.
Okay. In terms of what you would get back in pence in the pound terms from the proposed scheme of arrangement, do you have a feel for what you'd get back in pence in the pound terms through that, and conversely, what you might get through a successful FOS claim?
Yeah, I've got. I mean, one of the problems is that Link and the FCA keep talking about the 77%, implying 77p in the pound. And in my view, they've both colluded to confuse retail investors who aren't fully up to speed, as myself and others, that the 77p is only with respect to the value at the time of the Woodford Equity Income Fund closed on the 3rd of June 2019. And it's not compared to the pound that I invested. Many, I suspect, who voted yes believe they are getting 77p in the pound on what they invested, but it'd be well short of that, and they won't find that out till 2024. Now, when using the Financial Ombudsman Service in what's called the FTSE Private Investor Growth Index, my investment in WEF using accumulation shares would be worth, as of 2 days ago, £64,000. Through the scheme of arrangement, I will only receive a total of £29,000, meaning I'll make an overall loss of £35,000 if I hadn't been in WEF and I'd been in other investments. So when you compare this to my original 46,000, I've actually lost 46%, which is a significant loss for a retail investment in 1 year.
Thank you for explaining, Alan. That's very clear and very precise. Thank you. In general terms, how has the Woodford scandal impacted you and your family?
And mainly me rather than my family. It's made me very more sensitive and inquisitive regarding any investments that are made on my behalf. I've lost faith in FOS and the FCA, whose main purpose is to protect retail investors from rogue investment managers who bend or break the rules, and authorized corporate directors who are meant to provide good governance and do not. This has been the case with Link Fund Solutions and the Woodford Investment Management.
You've already touched on the FCA, Alan, but if you wish, please tell us a bit more about how you feel in relation to how the FCA has handled matters.
The FCA, as I said, clearly, I believe, have colluded and worked very close with Eversell, and LFS Link have used whatever means they can to say that it's legal privilege and they can't tell us what they've been talking about. And the FCA and Link really want this whole scandal to be closed down as quickly as possible and put away. because they can't afford it to go to court. If it did go to court, it would bring all the bad practices in the public domain that I believe strongly would show the FCA, Link, Woodford Investment Management all being at fault for not stopping these losses from being incurred by investors. This issue goes right back to when Andrew Bailey, the now Bank of England manager, when he was in charge of the FCA, and unfortunately, it still continues today. The FCA should not have supported or colluded with Link in this process, as they should have championed retail investors' rights, which they have totally failed to do. There's a really good expression which I use in the High Court on the 10th of October, that good people make good decisions when they have good information. Unfortunately, at best, we've received skewed and very biased information in favour of Link, with a very long-awaited FCA report into the Woodford scandal not being released to investors, which I suspect must contain important information for investors to help them make the right decision regarding the Link's SOA. We'll hopefully see the report one day, but I have no faith that it won't be available until 2025, and even then it will be brushed under the carpet. All in all, my view is the FCA is not fit for purpose and urgently needs an independent root and branch investigation. It needs to become a government-created body that has teeth which it is willing to use, and that it champions those of retail investors. It should not also be allowed to collude with companies such as Link to the detriment of retail investors, as it has done so far today.
And thank you very much indeed for sharing those particular points. Very powerful and very clear indeed. In terms of the scheme of arrangement, which of course you've touched on, is there anything else you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, and they're also regarding the 77p. It's been very poorly communicated, as I said before, and the FCA even announced on the 19th of April, and I quote from their statement, "If the proposed redress amount of 235 million is paid in full, then investors will have recovered approximately 77p in the pound." Again, this statement is very misleading. It doesn't say with respect to the WEF share value at the time of closing, and it's not against what investors invested. So it's a massive difference. Going to the scheme of arrangement, it's an awful deal. It's only 25% of what Link should be paying as the redress. The scheme of arrangement is only with respect to the Woodford Equity Fund when it closed on the 3rd of June. Although the issues that all these losses have caused started back in 2016 and 2017. And really the SOA should have gone right back to those dates. Link in the SOA nor the FCA have been transparent about Link having made £940 million of capital losses since the WEF was closed due to Link's fire sale and getting rid of as much liquid investments at any price. When Link closed the WEF, it said, in their words, to protect investors. Well, if this is protecting investors by losing nearly £1 billion, then the financial investment market is in big trouble. The SOA should not be approved by the court on the 18th of January, as it takes away retail investors' rights to apply for compensation through the Financial Ombudsman Service and the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, which were set as part of an Act of Parliament known as the Financial Services Marketing Act. Also, I don't believe that Link have the authority to take these rights away from individuals, as they state in Part 5, page 30 of their explanatory letter, and I quote, "Where a scheme creditor's claim is released, the scheme creditor will not be able to bring that claim against the Financial Services Compensation Scheme." It's there in black and white.
Again, Alan, thank you very much indeed. In terms of the voting process and the vote outcome, what would you like to say about that?
Many things. First off, the vote's been a sham. It was overcomplicated, and I know of a number of investors who just gave up and didn't vote. If you look on some of the forums, people said I tried and gave up. Even worse than that, the scheme meeting had 2 emails that was communicated to investors leading up to the 13th of December. And in those emails, they only gave a start time of 10 o'clock, but no end time. It wasn't until the start of the meeting on the 13th, the scheme meeting, that the chairperson said that they would continue until all questions had been answered, and they would leave it for an extra hour, which ended up being around about 1:30. When the meeting was closed, so was the Lumi voting portal, which meant anybody who wished to vote on that day after 1:30 could not. This is unfair, and Link should have communicated this in their emails to the event. I don't know anybody who has up to 250 to 300,000 people who may vote. They've only had 54,000 in advance. Not be told when voting will close. It's a bit like going for a government vote and saying the poll opens at 9 and they close at lunchtime. It's just nonsense. I actually went back in at 13:30 to raise another question, but could not. The voting portal should have been available all day of the 13th of December and not until 1:30. Unfortunately, the published result by Link, just using percentages, is wholly inadequate. And I do hope the full report to the court is fully transparent and provides much richer detailed information on the voting and any block votes that happened. Unfortunately, with the whole SOA process, Link will only provide basic information that they believe they can get away with. I have asked Clifford Chance, their lawyers, for the vote report outline without the numbers, but they've just said they will report to the court as requested. Unfortunately, the court has not stipulated what they wish to see in the report, which is not great for investors, and it gives Links the opportunity to only give a much limited report. Now, if I turn to the number of yes votes, we were told there were 54,000 votes, of which 93.7%, i.e. just under 51,000, voted yes. When you look at that number, it only represents between 17 and 20% of all the eligible investors who could vote. Therefore, if the court approves the scheme of arrangement on the 18th of January, for every 1 vote that voted yes, there are 4 or 5 other investors who the scheme of arrangement will be legally binding on them, and I expect many are not even aware of it. It will be. This seems very unfair, and the yes vote really needs to be more representative of the total number of eligible voters, which I've said is somewhere in the region of 250 to 300,000. I personally suspect there's been some significant block voting by 1 or more platforms on behalf of their direct investors, as the platforms, due to their contract with investors, say they can vote on their behalf. The High Court on the 12th of October should, in their ruling, in my personal view, should have set a minimum percentage of votes to be cast by eligible voters to make it a valid vote, and to ensure Link did a better job of engaging and communicating with investors, which they've not done so by design, even though they will say they've tried their very best.
Alan, thank you. And the very final question, what, if anything else, would you like to say?
The list is endless, but I'll just hone in on a few if I may. The scheme of arrangement has relied very heavily on the FCA's 298 million calculation, as Link have constantly referred to it, basically saying, if you don't accept our offer, which is 230 million, and represents 80% of the FCA's number, then you may not get much more. Just a threat. Now, the major issue is the Financial Conduct Authority's calculation of the 298 million has never been challenged. It only appeared in court on the 10th of April with 1 page showing it had been calculated. And it only goes back to November 2018. And as I said, the issues with WEF started well back in 2016 and 17. And really, the FCA should have gone back further. The actual calculation for the 298 million by the Financial Conduct Authority is far too basic, and the real amount should be nearer £1 billion. I also find it quite strange that the figure is not far off Link's total for the SOA of 230 million. and one could expect that both parties have concluded to make it so. Link, really, before going to the High Court on the 10th of October, should have created a database of all their direct investors, because unfortunately, Link do not know who most of their direct investors are, because they're via platforms. They could have used the data provided by the 98 platforms and intermediaries as part of their practice statement letter request, because they actually requested that information at that time back in September. They could have then used this database to directly contact direct investors rather relying on platforms intermediaries who in general have been very poor at communicating to their investors and at times passing incorrect information or no information at all. My very last point concerns the total number of investors in WEF, which if you include all the investors in the multi-manager funds, this is something like 500,000 investors. Therefore, only 50,600 voted yes. This means only 10% of voters will affect nearly 500,000 investors. That is a phenomenal number and a phenomenal few people who are affecting a very large number of people. The whole link process and the FCA should have taken this into account, but they have deliberately not done so, as it does not suit their agenda to put the whole and they want to put the whole scandal into the history books.
Alan, thank you very much indeed. Just before we wrap up, can I just check something with you? You made reference, I think, to the 10th of April being when the FCA figure was mentioned. Did you mean 10th of October or was it 10th of April?
What the quote that I gave you from them, it was back in April.
It was April. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it was the 19th of April.
Thank you very much indeed. All right. Alan, I'm very grateful to you for setting aside some time for us to get these thoughts out there. Mr. Pyatt, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.